Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we begin Perek Echad Ve'esrim, the 21st Perek in the Rambam, Hilchos Issurei, the laws of forbidden relationships, which, after we spoke about in general, arayas, specific kahanim, and related halachas, now the Rambam talks about the more general, about distancing oneself from those women that are forbidden to a man, and about illicit thoughts, and in general laws relating to that of marriage, what's permitted and what's forbidden. So Rambam begins halacha alf regarding coming even close to an erva. As the Rambam says, kalabala erva min ha'arayas. If someone comes close to one of the forbidden women for him to have a relationship with, derech ivar, through the limbs, meaning not through his genital or her genitalia. He doesn't insert the corona into the vaginal area. Rather, he just touches her body parts, and he engages in other types of activities, or he embraces or he kisses her in a way of a less lustful way. And he derives pleasure from the physical contact, from the closeness of their flesh. So he gets biblical lashes, because the capital punishment in Karas is only with actual relations, or at least the beginning of that process. But here, where he's engaging in closeness, of physical closeness, here it's just that of lashes. Shlomo says in the pasuk in Yikro, not to engage in any of these abominable practices, etc. Where like it says in the pasuk over there, one should not come close to reveal the nakedness. What that means to say is, we shouldn't come close to things that could bring to the actual forbidden relationship. So it's not just the act of cohabitation that's forbidden, but it's any type of lustful physical engagement that's additionally prohibited too. Now, halacha base is the Rambam. If anyone engages in these types of practices, we really suspect them regarding having had forbidden relationships with an Arab, because again, these things lead to that. And therefore, the asaladim is rabbinically forbidden for a person likritz beyadav v'raglov, to motion with his hands, with his feet, or to allude to with his eyes, to wink to one of the forbidden women that are to him, or to laugh with her, to be lightheaded with her, even just to smell the perfume that's on her, or to gaze at her beauty, also that's forbidden. And we give lashes to someone who intends to do this, rabbinic lashes. When someone is intently looking at the small finger of a woman, his intention is to derive pleasure. It's like he's gazing at the woman's genitalia, and even to hear the voice of the forbidden woman, to see her here, asr is forbidden. Now, halacha gimel says the Rambam, and these things are forbidden, even those that are not an erva, which are the chiv creases, even those that are only biblically forbidden with that of a negative prohibition. However, but a man is permitted to gaze at a single girl's face, and to inspect whether she's a virgin or not a virgin, if he's looking, that if she's appropriate in his eyes, that he'll marry her. And there's no prohibition. And actually, not only that, says the Rambam, it's appropriate to do that, that a person should look at the girl, at the woman, if he's going to be pleased with marrying her. But even if one is, let's say, dating, one should not be gazing in a promiscuous way, in a way of to derive pleasure. That the pasuk says in Eve, a covenant I have made for my eyes. Why would I contemplate on a virgin? It's forbidden to gaze for the purposes of pleasure. Now, halacha daled. However, a person is permitted to gaze at his wife when she's a menstruating woman, which, although she's an erva, but by one's wife that's permitted as long as it doesn't look at the concealed parts of her body. Now, although he derives satisfaction and pleasure when he looks at her, but since he's going to be permitted at a later point in time, the period is only for a short amount of time. It's not going to come to a stumbling block, which the whole purpose, like we said, of a lot of these activities is that going to bring to something forbidden. But he should not laugh and be lightheaded with us. That could bring to sin, where even with one's wife, she's an erva for that time period, and therefore one shouldn't go and engage in practices that are frivolous, which could bring to a forbidden relationship with one's own wife when she's in nida. Now, halacha hey, asas lishtamish be'isha klal. Further along these lines, it's forbidden to utilize the services of a woman at all. Being Gitana, whether she's an adult or a minor, being Shivcha, being Shachres, whether she's maidservant or whether she's a free woman. Shamil Dehir might bring to illicit thoughts if one is engaging a woman for these activities. Now, says the Rambam, what do we mean a woman cannot serve a man at all? It means rechitzas panam, washing his hands or his feet or his face, or spreading out the bed in front of him, or pouring a cup for him. Because these things are not done for a man, they're only done by his wife. And therefore these are things that are forbidden types of activities for any woman to do for a different man. And one does not ask about the welfare of a woman at all. Even through an agent, it's not appropriate to be inquiring about another woman. Now, now, if someone embraces one of the forbidden women, which is an erv of him to marry, to engage in relation with, which a person's heart is not banging on them, meaning to say that he's not afraid, which means clapping, his heart is banging, that is, if he's afraid he's going to be doing something inappropriate, he's not afraid of that. Or he kissed one of them. For example, his older sister. He's not having those types of thoughts. Or his aunt, his mother's sister, or things like that, which they're an erv of him. Now, although there's no lust over there, there's no pleasure over there at all. Still says a Rambam, it's very disgraceful. But also, and it's something that's forbidden, and it's the act of fools. Shein craven ever closes around because we don't come close to an erv at all, to embrace them, to kiss them, whether she's an adult or whether a minor. The one exception is a mother to a son, and a father to his daughter. But all other ones, whether it be an older sister, whether it be that of an aunt, is forbidden. Now, Halacha Zayin says, how so? What do we say is permitted with a parent and a child? A father is permitted to embrace his daughter, to kiss her, but he could even sleep to our flesh, skin to skin, with closeness of flesh. So to a mother with her son. As long as they're minors. Now, but once they get older and the son becomes an adult, and the daughter becomes adult, and she matures until her breast develops and her hair sprouts, which is paraphrasing the pasuk in Yecheskel. Then the man should sleep with his clothing, and the woman to sleep with her clothing. Again, whether it be a father and a daughter or a mother with her son. Moreover, let's say the daughter was embarrassed to stand in front of her father undressed. Or she got married, or let's say the mother is embarrassed to stand in front of her son undressed, even though they're minors, they're little children, but if it reached a stage where she's embarrassed to be undressed in front of them, then you cannot sleep together with them in the same bed, only if they're in their clothing, in their pajamas, but not in a state of undress. Now, Halacha Ches, the Rambam continues on other inappropriate types of activities relating to arais, and specifically relating to that of lesbian activities. As the Rambam says, women who rub themselves in a sexual way, Asur is forbidden. It's actually from the actions of Egypt, the old ancient Egypt that we were warned about. So like it says in the Torah, you shouldn't be doing like the actions of the people of Mitzrayim. What would they do? A man would marry a man, homosexual, a woman would marry a woman, lesbian, and the woman would get married to two men. Now, says the Rambam, also, although this action, as we said, which women are rubbing each other, is forbidden, we don't give lashes over that. It does not have a distinct negative prohibition in the Torah for it. There is no act of relations here at all. And therefore that would not make her forbidden. If, let's say, she had engaged in these types of activities, would not become forbidden to a kohen because of being a zayna. Like to us, neither would a woman become forbidden to her husband, where if she engaged with these practices with another woman, shein comes nus. Again, does not qualify for an act of biah to be considered as nus. But Verola Kaisin Makas Mar, this is appropriate to give them rabbinic lashes, since they did do something forbidden. Now, moreover, a man should be particular about his wife from engaging in these types of things. He should prevent those women that are known to engage in types of practices from coming into his wife, to their apartment, and from her going to them, because again, it's highly inappropriate and it's something that's forbidden. Halacha test, the Rambam continues regarding in relationships that are appropriate and inappropriate in the marriage itself. Says the Rambam, a person's wife is permitted to him. Therefore, meaning unlike all the other eyes, his wife is designated for him. Whatever a man wants to do with his wife in an intimate way, they can do. They can have relations whenever they want to. He can kiss any limb of her body that he wants to. He can have relations with her in the natural vaginal way and the unnatural anal way. But Rambam says as long as he does not spill the seed in vain. Now, but in spite of this, although that's all permitted, midas chasidus, an act of piety, is a person should not be so lightheaded in these activities. The person should sanctify himself in the times of bad relations, like we explained in Hilchos Biah, which the laws of appropriate types of behavior, and a person should not stray from the path of the world and its custom. The purpose of these activities is to be fruitful and to multiply, to have children. The pleasure was given to motivate, but as we see, the moment that activity is, the seed has been given over, which is to have children, then the pleasure is gone. And that shows us that that's the purpose, and therefore, although one could do whatever he wants to, as the Rambam says, but the Rambam himself says, Aminus Chasidus is obviously to use this as an opportunity to sanctify oneself and to create a more refined and more intimate relationship. Halachi Yud, says the Rambam, now, however, it is forbidden to have relations to the light of the candle. It's not appropriate to be doing this in the light. Now, Harisha is Shabbos. What happens? What does one do if, let's say, it's Shabbos, and he doesn't have another house, and they're Dalik, and there was a candle lit? Says Ram, so then he cannot have marriage relations because you can't put out the candle on Shabbos, you have nowhere else to go, and you can't have relations with the lights on. So it is forbidden for a Jewish man to have marital relations during the daytime. Because again, it's brazenness to have it where the light of the sun is shining on them. Now, if he was a Talmudic scholar, he's not going to come to draw after these types of relationships. Then he could go ahead and cloak himself, cover himself with his cloak, and that way creating darkness and have relations that way. But says Rambam, we don't come onto this type of a heter, this leniency only if it's a time of great need. But if not, one should not have relations during the daytime. And B'derech Kedusha, in the way of real sanctity, is l'shamash b'emtza halayla, is to have relations in middle of the night. Not the beginning, not the end, but in middle of the night time. Halacha Yidalf. However, it's not the intelligence of the sages is not okay. Is not an agreement to someone that is constantly increasing the cohabitation, the relations that he has. And that is always by his wife like a rooster, where he's always looking to have relations. And he's considered very deficient. It's the act of the foolish ones. Rather, says the Rambam, the more one diminishes the relations, he's better off. Now, for who? However, the Rambam gives an important qualification. Obviously, he cannot stop the amount of times he has an obligation to have marital relations, which is an obligation he has to his wife, unless with his wife's consent. And moreover, says the Rambam, it wasn't originally instituted, Lavali Karoyin, for a person that had a seminal emission, a discharge, that he shouldn't learn Torah until he immersed himself, which Rambam says initially, because ultimately that was subsequently mavutal, that was then nullified. But the whole purpose was to diminish the amount of relationship. A person can say, okay, I'm not going to learn until I go toivel, so okay, he'll skip a night. The whole purpose, you see, is to diminish the amount of tashmish, again, as long as it's midas ishtay. Halach Yud. So to the sages said it's forbidden. A person now have relations, and that during married relations, he's thinking about another woman. He shouldn't have relations when he's intoxicated. Not when there's a fight going on. Not when there's hatred. He should not force her to have relations, and she's afraid of him. Neither should they have relations when one of them is excommunicated. She shouldn't have relations with her when he already made up his mind that he's going to divorce her. If he does any one of these types of relations, the children are not going to be appropriate. Rather, from them there's the brazen ones, if they're rebellious and the sinners. These are not things that a person should be doing when he's having relations. It's the highest point of connection and intimacy with his partner. So the sages said, any audacious woman, that she openly goes and petitions her husband to say, I want to have relations, or if he seduces a woman for the purposes of marriage, or let's say his intention was to have relations with his wife Rachel, and then he had relations instead with his wife Leah, or let's say a woman didn't wait the appropriate 3 months from her first husband, and she got married, now the new child is doubt what his paternity is. All the children born from these types of unions, they're the rebellious people, they're the sinners. That it's the affliction of the exile that will select and refine them, because again, these are things that are inappropriate. A person has to have his sole focus on his partner when they're having relations, and that it should be done in a more modest and discreet way. Halach Yudalt. So to v'asl adam lavei al ishtoi, a person is forbidden to have relations with his wife, b'shvakim or b'chayvis, in the marketplace, in the streets, or beganis, b'pradesim, in the gardens or in the orchards. It can't be out in the open. Rather, it's supposed to be in a room that it shouldn't just look like immoral, promiscuous behavior. And that will bring them to acts of znus, doing it out in the open in this flamboyant type of a way. If someone does have relations with his wife in these types of places, out in the open, we give him rabbinic lashes. And so if someone does engagement with the act of cohabitation, which is biblically appropriate, but the rabbi said that it's not appropriate, and if someone does kiddushin in the street, or he gets engaged without doing the shidduch process, which is about getting engaged, or even the non-halacha engagement, about making up to say we're going to get married. So someone doesn't discipline rabbinically, the rabbis held that this is the people are not on that level to do these types of behaviors, and therefore it's inappropriate, and therefore give him the lashes of the rebellious people. Halakha Tezvav. Now, v'achsanai, a guest, also betashma shemita sheyachs basis, forbidden to have marital relations until he comes back to his house. And a lot of these halachas are all the same idea about being discreet, and about being appropriate, about being modest. As Rambam continues regarding the appropriate modesty, it's forbidden for a man to dwell in his father-in-law's house, because again, it's brazen to be having intimacy there in his father-in-law's house. He shouldn't go with his father-in-law into the bathhouse together. The person shouldn't go into the bathhouse with its father. Neither with his brother-in-law, with his wife's, with his sister's husband. Neither with his student. But now, if he needed his student to assist him, then mutter then is permitted. Now, the yesh becomes there are certain places that the custom is that neither the two brothers go in at one time into the bathhouse. Furthermore, the Jewish women should not go with their hair uncovered in the marketplace. Whether you're talking about a single woman or a married woman, which that refers to a widow or divorcee or a woman who had relations, but a virgin is permitted to go out with her hair uncovered. Also, a woman should not go in the marketplace with her son behind her. That's a rabbinic concern, where shemi yitfasu b'na, because what might happen is that people might grab her son, she's going to go after her son to get him back, and the wicked people are going to fool around with her, because they grab the son as a way to fool around to molest the woman. So one should not have that type of situation where it's behind her and she's not going to know where it is and going to look after it. If our child's in front of her, she'll know what's going on. The child should not be behind the woman, rather in front of her. Halachit Ram continues regarding related ideas about spilling seed in vain and about causing oneself to get an erection. Says Ram Halachit it's forbidden to go ahead and emit the seed from the male organ in waste, in vain. Therefore, a person should not, what the metaphor, the euphemism is, to thresh in the inside, and to winnow on the outside, which is the procedures of grain, but what it means to say is he shouldn't be having relations and then, before he's about to emit seed, to exit, and thus emit the seed outside. So to relatable, he shouldn't marry a minor that's not fit to have children, again, because that's wasting the seed, because she cannot conceive from that. Now, but those that commit adultery with their hand, what it means to say is, that with their own hands they cause themselves to emit seed, so not only is that it's a great sin, but someone that does this act, he sits in a state of excommunication. And regarding them, the Pasuk says in Yeshaya, your hands are full with blood, meaning because he killed the soul, because what he did was these seeds could have conceived a child, which now they went in waste, as if he killed a soul, damim malayu. Halacha Yates, the also related is it's forbidden for a person to cause himself to get an erection intentionally, or to bring himself to lewd, illicit thoughts. Elo, rather says the Rambam, here, if thoughts do come to a person, he should remove himself from these vain and destructive thoughts, to thoughts of the words of Torah. Shehi, as the Rambam paraphrases the pasuk in Mishneh, ayelas ahavim, the beloved hind, v'yalas chen, and arousing favor, that a person should engage his thoughts with Torah, which can help combat him from the thoughts of viznus. Therefore, it's forbidden for a person to sleep on his back with his face facing upwards, until he tilts a little bit to the side. They shouldn't come to erection, which could happen by laying on one's back. As we said, a person not allowed to cause himself to get an erection, which all related to this idea about wasting seed in vain. So he should not be gazing at an animal, a wild animal, birds, but when the species are mating the male with the female. However, it is permitted for those who mate animals for the purposes of the procreation. They can even insert like a tube into an applicator into a tube, which is the male organ into the female area, because they're engaged in their job. They're not going to come to illicit thoughts. They're busy doing the work they got to do. It's also forbidden for a person, a man, to gaze at women when they're doing laundry, when they're on the laundry. And even to gaze at a woolen garment of a woman that he recognizes, even just as a garment, is forbidden. Over here again, these things are forbidden. They shouldn't come to a forbidden thoughts. Halacha beis, if someone encounters a woman in the street, he's not allowed to go after her, behind her. Ella, rather, what should he do is he should run and pass her by on the side, or have her be behind her, have her behind him. And if someone does go in the street behind a woman, it's from the lower ones of the ignorant people. And it's forbidden to pass by the entryway of a woman that's a harlot until he distanced himself at least a distance of 4 amas. Like says in the pasuk in Mishneh, which is talking about the zayin over there, and don't even go close to the opening of her house. Halach of Gimel, related to these halachas, it's forbidden for a person that's not married to put his hands by his testicles. They hear again, that should not bring him to illicit thoughts. And this is a lower level, but even beneath his navel, beneath his belly, he shouldn't insert his hand in that whole region. Should be able to hear again, because it might bring to illicit thoughts. The Mishneh, if he's urinating, shouldn't hold his male organ and urinate. But if he's married, then mutter, then it is permitted. Now, but says Rambam, whether a person is married or not, he should not be touching his male organ at all, only if it's a time when he has to use his orifices, when he has to go ahead and urinate. Now, halach of Dalad, but the Rambam takes us a step higher. From the earlier pious ones and from the great sages, one of them glorified himself, that he never gazed at his circumcision, at his male organ. And from them there was someone who glorified himself, that he never gazed at the form of a woman. because his heart, his thoughts were removed from these vain, empty thoughts, l'divrei emes, to the words of truth, shem eiches es levav HaKadoshim, which that's what grabs hold of the hearts of the holy ones, with the thinking words of Torah, and not in things of relating to znus or other illicit thoughts. Now, Halacha of Hey, the Rambam continues, regarding with whom it is appropriate for someone to marry. Mitzvah Chacham, it's the commandment of the sages. Sheyasi odem banav b'neisav samach l'pirkim. That a person should marry off his sons and his daughters close to puberty when they're becoming the age of bar mitzvah. Shemiyanichim, because if you leave them any longer, you build these nus, they're going to come to znus, or they hear or to illicit thoughts. That's what Pasuk says in Eve, if you check on your abode, and you won't sin, you make sure you marry them off. Now it's, however, forbidden to marry off a woman to a minor. So that's like znus, where that discrepancy is highly inappropriate and it's like an act of znus. Halacha vav. Now, it's forbidden for a man to dwell alone without being married to a woman. Now, he shouldn't marry a barren woman or elderly woman which is not fit to have children. Now, however, it is permitted for a woman to never get married, where she doesn't have an obligation to have children, and neither do we have the same concerns as we have with a male. Or she could even marry a eunuch. She could marry someone that can't have children. Now, but a young man should not marry an elderly woman. And an elderly man should not marry a young woman. Again, this brings to ideas of znus. It's not the appropriate types of relationships that are homogeneous, and therefore these things could bring to types of znus. Halacha zayin. So to someone divorced his wife from being married to him, he should not dwell with his ex-wife in the same courtyard. Again, it could bring to acts of znus because they're friendly. They obviously were intimate already before. Now, if he was a kohen, which he actually has a biblical prohibition of a grusha, which is even by his own wife, so then he shouldn't even dwell with her in the same alleyway. Now, Kfar Katan need to come up in the small village is like the same mabay, where it's forbidden for them to live in the same village. Now, Hayla Mil, that's like, but let's say she has an outstanding debt, a loan by him that she has to collect, so she has to make an agent to go and collect, she can't go herself. Now, now, if the divorcee comes with the couple, the ex-couple comes to a court case, and we excommunicate them, so we give them a rabbinic lashes because you don't belong together in the same area. Now, the discussion with the Erison, but if she was divorced from just being halachically engaged, then she's allowed to go ahead and come to the court case to go ahead and claim from him, and she's allowed to dwell with him in the same area because they were never intimate. But if they were very overly friendly, then then even if they were just engaged and then divorced, even that would be forbidden for them, as the laws as we mentioned before. Now, so we said they can't live in the same courtyard or even the same mother possibly. So who gets pushed away from who? Who has to move away? She gets rejected from him. She has to move away. But if it was her courtyard, then he gets rejected from her. She gets to stay there and he has to move away. Now, continue on the appropriate and inappropriate relationships, and that are related to divorce that we just spoke about. It's forbidden for a man to marry a woman with his intention to divorce her. Shlomo says the pasuk in Mishneh, don't plot on your friend evil, but he's dwelling confidently with you, where she thinks she's getting married to you, and like, wow, this is amazing, and his intention is to ultimately divorce her. Now, but if he notifies her in the beginning that says, we're only going to marry for a short period of time, then mutter then is permitted because, again, she's obviously agreeable to this, and therefore it's not a violation of the pasuk of V'hu Yoshev Levetach Itach. Halacha Chavtes. A person should not marry a woman in this country, and another woman in another country. Because maybe after a long period of time, what's going to happen is you're going to have a brother marrying his sister, or his mother's sister, or his father's sister, and things like that. No one's going to know about it because what's going to happen is that you have over here a whole different family that his father made some other country, and they have no clue that they're related at all. Now, but if he's a great person, he was world renowned, very zarma for some of Yidum, and his children are well known, and it's something that's well publicized. Harizamut then is permitted for him to marry two different women in two different countries because he's going to find out that, oh, you're that person's, who's your, that's and finding out, so therefore that would be permitted. Halacha lamed. Man should not marry a woman from a family of lepers, not from a family that have epilepsy, Now, v'hu, what does that mean that the family has this? That it already happened, it's established 3 times, which made a chazaka, because that's going to make their children have the same illness as what's in the family. Halacha lamed alef. Isha shenises l'shnei anashim hamesu. A woman married 2 men, and both of them died. She was widowed twice. So l'shlisha lo tinase, then she should not marry a 3rd man, because already chazaka that she, so to speak, kills men. Now, if she did get married, the late taste she doesn't have to leave. The truth is, even if they just get engaged, yichdes, they could consummate the relationship and get married. Now, Belisi Yisrael Amaoritz Kahenes, Yisrael, that's an Amaoritz, an ignoramus, should not marry a Bas Kohen. It's like a desecration of profanity of the descendants of Aaron. Vimnasa, and if an Amaoritz does get married to a Bas Kohen, the sages said, it's not going to be a shidduch, a partnership, a pairing that's going to work out well. Rather, they're going to die without having children. Or either he or she's going to die speedily, or it's going to be some type of fight between them. But a Talmud scholar that marries a Bas Kohen, he says, no, Meshubach, that's beautiful and that's praiseworthy. Now you have Torah and Kuna in the same place as one. Halach Lamed Beis. A man should not marry the daughter of an Am Haaretz. Because if he dies or he has to go out into exile, if he gets, he has to move away. His children are going to be ignoramuses. Because their mother doesn't know the crown of the Torah and the beauty, and she's not going to bring them up in that way. Now, moreover, a person should not marry off his daughter to Haaretz. Because whoever gives his daughter over to ignoramus, it's like he bound her and put her in front of a lion. Which means mako boil, because ignoramus he hits his wife and he has relations. He's not even embarrassed. And the person should always sell whatever he has. And marry the daughter of a Talmudic scholar. Because then, if he dies or if he goes into exile, his children will be Talmudic scholars because of the mother who had such a father who knows what it means, the beauty of living a life of Torah. A person should also marry off his daughter Talmudic scholar, because there's nothing disgraceful, and no disputes and fights in the house of a Talmudic scholar.